You know, it's really especially pleasing to stand up here and introduce a writer from my old place of employment, the Washington Post. And Neely Tucker in particular has had one of those career climbs in journalism that a lot of young reporters aspire to. He began while in college at the University of Mississippi, rather low on the totem pole, writing for the smallest daily newspaper in Mississippi, the Oxford Eagle. But already he stood out, winning a bunch of regional awards. Then after some time spent reporting in Florida, he ended up at the Detroit Free Press and landed a plum assignment as a foreign correspondent, first covering Europe and then sub-Saharan Africa. 15 years ago, after returning to the United States, he joined the Post, where he's been a staff writer up until very recently for the Sunday magazine, and he's just been moved to the national desk to help cover the increasingly exciting 2016 presidential election. So that's the accomplished newspaperman part of Neely's life so far. But he's also tried his hand successfully at a longer form writing, beginning with a very moving memoir just over a decade ago, Love in the Driest Season, that told the story of the struggle by him and his wife to adopt a girl from an orphanage in Zimbabwe, filled with very sick infants. In the past few years, as Neely has continued to report nonfiction stories for the Post by day, he's been composing fiction furiously by night and distinguishing himself at that as well. His popular DC-based mystery, The Ways of the Dead, which came out just last year, introduced the dogged, boozing, street-smart crime reporter Sully Carter, himself a battered former war correspondent. Now in Neely's new novel, Murder DC. I mean, isn't that a great title for a mystery? Sully is back, again investigating a murder, this time the drug-related death of the 21-year-old son of a prominent local black family. But of course, the drug connection turns out not to be the whole story, and the case takes the enterprising Sully from back alleys to the halls of power. As engrossing as suspenseful as the first novel was, this one has even more refined pacing and equally great dialogue. Said a reviewer in Kirkus, quote, "There's no more satisfying sight than a writer who knows exactly what he's doing and only gets better at what he does." So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Neely Tucker.
Hi, guys. I think the title I do like a great deal, and I am going to give credit where it is due to my lovely spouse who came up with it, who is right here identifying herself. Yes, we were all stuck for a title, and Carol came up with it. As Brad mentioned, this is the second time here, and I always take a minute to say thank you to independent bookstores, because I grew up in rural Mississippi in a little small town, and I didn't know that everybody didn't have great bookstores, because there were Square Books in Oxford, there was the Book Mart in my little town of Starkville, there's Lemuria down in Jackson, and bookstores like this are just always terrific. I always feel at home in them because I grew up in them. And we were here last year with Sully making his debut, and he is back. For those of you who read that book, this one takes place about 7 months later, which makes it the early spring of 2000. For those of you who haven't read it, I noticed they have them right up front. These guys don't miss a trick. But so the first book was about the murder of a prominent judge's daughter, right along Princeton Place in D.C. It was based on a real story. This one is also based on a real story and some real history, but I can't tell you the real story because it would be a monstrous plot spoiler. There wouldn't be much point in reading the book because you'd pretty well know where things were going. But by the spring of 2000, it's about 7 months later, Sully has been sent to rehab, as Brad mentioned. He has a drinking and an attitude problem. It's a real stretch for me to come up with. And he has been sent to rehab. He's come back out. He's doing a little bit better. But Sully is also a very Southern character. And some of D.C. it's in some ways it's a very Southern city. In some ways it's not. But in the ways it is, Sully is a very Southern character. And he has a specific, what he mostly has is attitude, right? A lot of it. He is not the kind of Southern, say, of the Shelby Foote extraction of the Memphis planter's son, who has the accent that seems to fall so favorably upon the feminine ear. This isn't Sully, nor is he the more of the my people, the Merle Haggards of the world, who put an S on the end of everything, whether it's there or not. We're going in town to the Walmarts. My dad said that all the time. Starksville was where we were from. There's no S in there. And Sully's not that either. He's from Louisiana, a tiny little town called Tula. He's sort of right on the edge of being poor white Cajun trash. He lost his girlfriend in Bosnia, Nadia, and his memory of her closed the last book. He also, you found out in this book, he lost his mom to homicide in their little town. His dad more or less drank himself to death shortly thereafter. He and his sister were farmed out to different towns. His sister went out, Lucinda, went out to Phoenix, and Sully got farmed out to New Orleans. Mainly, I sent him down to New Orleans so that if I ever wanted to go to New Orleans, I could write it off as research for the book, which is a very important thing you want to keep in mind. But the best way to meet Sully and get a little idea of what he does is to listen to him. I learned a lot of dialogue from, or how to do it from Elmore Leonard, who basically say if the dialogue is about attitude, and if your characters don't have attitude, they shouldn't have dialogue. And so this takes place very early in the book. As you know, the 21, 22-year-old son of a very prominent black family turns up dead in the Washington Channel. And there is a fictional drug island that has a really bad drug history that I created. If you're familiar with Southwest D.C. and you know where the Titanic Memorial is, just down from the Gangplank Marina, okay, and then their Fort McNair starts, okay, I expanded the earth a little bit, and I created this little knob of land that I call Frenchman's Bend. Which is my little shout out to Faulkner for those of you who were obsessed on Yakima County. That's where the Snopes are from, by the way, is Frenchman's Bend. And Sully comes back into the office. At this point, it's not known who the body is. It's going to turn out to be Billy Ellison. The name is, yes, a shout out to Ralph Ellison, an invisible man. And Billy Ellison turns out to be invisible to the people around him in any number of ways, as you'll find out during the book. And Sully is having a conversation. I'm going to read this bit because I notice many of my friends from the ink-stained and dying print industry are in here. I'm going to read, this is a bit about, they're discussing this story, and this is Sully and his editor, RJ. And Sully's just come back into the office after finding this, after the police have come across this body out in the Washington Channel. It's a floater story, but I don't know how good, he was saying. Back in the newsroom, back in the recycled air of the office, the quiet hum of the overhead fluorescents making him wish he was back out on the water, wishing RJ would get up off him for a minute. Dead body in the Washington Channel, scaring the tourists? What's not to love, RJ said, leaning over the wall of his cubicle, an editor looking for fresh meat for the final edition. He was rubbing his beard, the paper's wise old man in high good humor, his still black hair slicked back over his scalp, bow tie knotted at the button-down collar, all but chortling about this one. I saw it on the television a few minutes ago. It's all over cable now, did you know? Talking heads yammering about floating bodies, the nation's capital gone to hell in a handbasket. I sort of thought it did that a while back, Sully said. And you got the tourist, right? RJ said, looking down at him, his eyes big and weird through the bifocals. Yahoos from flyover, damn amazed this happened inside of the Capitol building? Yes, Sully said, at the marina. They were quite upset. You'd think they'd read the papers before they got here, RJ snorted. We've been the murdered capital since when? Bush? Reagan? Carter? You get anything great? Like, I had to cover my kid's eyes, or two of them said it was Clinton's fault. Any logic ascribed to that position? Are you serious? Like maybe they thought he tossed Monica in the water, and the floater was black and male. RJ sighed, still with a beard. Well, that's not very creative. No, that's going to put a dent in the story. I mean, not that it should, but you know, I could just make some shit up, Sully said. Nah, RJ said absently, looking at his nails now, not getting it. Nobody has a sense of humor anymore. Blew out his lips, looking around, coming out of a trance, realizing the hour. We got to do something for the Daily. I know it. You got out on the water, talked to the cops with Dave on the WCJT launch. I've been thinking about getting on me a little boat myself. Thrilled. Look, if you can get MPD to say it was drug-related, that'd help. Could you do that? You know, drug wars spilling out into tourist country, yada, yada. But what would be great? I mean, give this thing some elevation. If he's some sort of diplomat, an attaché at an embassy, or an operative with a couple of passports. A diplomat in baggy jeans and dreads, Sully said, rolling back in his chair, propping his feet on his desk. The ambassador to the state of the Most High. Jamaican, he said. He could be like an operative of the dreaded Blue Mountain Coffee Mafia. Now, Rastas don't get into the diplomat thing, RJ. And he might be a narc, but that's hardly your CIA henchman. RJ pulling off his glasses, polishing them, looking at his watch. Yeah, okay. Trying to get us somewhere. Look, unless we get some sort of ID on Floater Man, I'm talking 12 inches below the fold on the metro front. Maybe even inside. A lost day. Oh, shit, Sully thought. Little in the life of RJ was worse than a lost day. He'd won 2 Pulitzers, been a finalist twice more. Never mind the George Polks. The man was carpe diem and kick over the sandbox of life. Front page and cleavage, or it was all bullshit. That was RJ's take. Sometimes it's just vitamins, brother, Sully said, not steak sauce. Come again? It's going to run on B12, not A1, no matter what we do. You Southern people are so colorful. Well, here's a thought. You've had a run of vitamin stories of late, lad. Pop out front. Try the steak sauce. We tie it to the bin, Sully said, pulling his feet down, rolling up his chair to the desk. We'll be getting somewhere. I went down there just now. 2 vampires show up. They say they'll cap my ass. I come nosing around again. I say to you, I just stepped on a nerve. I say to you, Floater Man went into the water right there in Frenchman's Bend. This is going to be the M Street crew, the South Caps. They're always beefing in Southwest. The Hall brothers run vampires being your term for drug dealers. Bloodsuckers, yeah. They know anything about Floater Man? Like they're going to spout to me? But yeah, one of them, this kid, he blinked. He blinked? He blinked. You're fucking with me now, right? Just to have something to do? No, he blinked a lot. RJ looked at him hard, then blinked 3 times. Clearly the man is guilty of murder. How could anyone doubt this? Blinker Man kills Floater Man. I say we go hard with it on the front. No, what I'm saying is he has this little affectation, this tick. He blinks bam, 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 7, 8 times in a row. He knows something. Yeah, good tracking, Kimosabe, but that's not going to carry the water. Maybe you want to get your guy Parker to spout. He's a homicide director, right? Chief. John Parker is the chief of MPD homicide. He ain't going to say nothing unless he knows for sure. There's not even an ID on the body yet. Maybe he could blink it to you. Sully rubbed his eyes. I shouldn't have gone out there. I knew it, and I did it anyway. Like, blink, blink, pause, blink, blink. Morse code, you know? I repeat. RJ running with it now. A homicide cop blinking like that. I'd say it means they just busted Pablo Escobar down at 12. Look, we don't have any connection, RJ was saying, to the Frenchman's Bend, correct? All we got is that there was a man in the water and he scared the tourist. Sully finished for him. RJ raised his eyebrows, mock incredulous. Give the man the stuffed giraffe from the top rack. So we're seeing it the same way. Más o menos. So can you work some miracle before 5 o'clock? Not happening, Sully said. I'll send you something short and mean. By this time, the clock on the wall was ticking past 4. The newsroom at this hour was a place that if you didn't want to drink before, you did after. Editors with armpits about to break into a sweat, stories that were evaporating or that were taking too damn long or just were too damn long. copy editors settling in to examine the belly buttons and lint of newspaper copy, reporters with fixed faces and ties or blouses askew, legs crossed at the knees, feet pumping, leaning forward and slapping keyboards like they were percussion instruments, talking too damn loud into the phone. Sully could swear, he could actually swear that he could hear the clock tick from 20 paces. He opened a file in the paper's word processing system, tapped in a slug, floater man, and then closed his eyes. The shrink. His shrink. Christ, he was supposed to have been there 30 minutes ago. He picked up the phone and turned his shoulder into it so the words wouldn't travel. Tapped in the numbers to the psychiatrist. Gene Henderson himself picked up, surprising him. "You are not here," Henderson said, his tone abrupt, no hi hello. Sully didn't mind the man, actually liked him a little. "Astute," Sully said, "even for a former military man such as yourself. Is there an explanation?" "I'm working," Sully said, back down the line pleasantly. "This dead guy turned up in the channel, and it didn't make sense to me to stop working to come talk about work, if you see what I'm saying here. You did not call me beforehand to cancel." "Well, the dead dude didn't call me either," Sully said. "That's the thing about dead people." Henderson was talking then, taking that official tone, telling him that by the contract the paper had signed, he was now required to inform HR that Sully had missed the appointment. And this was the third one this year, 3 and 4 months. And that was way over the line of peachy, 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 he said, cutting Henderson off. "Just be sure to tell them I couldn't make your appointment because I was covering the murder of a young man and having other young men with guns say they'll shoot me if I come back and ask any more questions about it. And, you know, if they'd like to cough up some combat pay for that sort of work, I'd be pleased." 3 times, 4 months, Henderson repeated. Sully looking in his desk for gum and not finding any, the worry about bourbon on his breath in the back of his mind. You'd think gum wouldn't be that hard of a thing to keep in a desk. "So you'll bill me for me," he said. "You won't go broken, either will I." "Next week, same time," Henderson said. "You'd do well to remember this is not an optional program." The line disconnected. Sully looked at it, decided he liked Henderson a little less today than he had yesterday. He slumped back in his chair so far his skinny ass was barely on the seat, stuck a pen in his mouth to chew, and proceeded to take the easy day-hit cheap shot. Tourists aboard a sightseeing yacht in the Washington Channel were startled yesterday to see a corpse floating past their view of the tidal basin. A few minutes later, across the way, R.J. hooted, reading behind him. "My boy," he exclaimed, "you're so subtle." And that is how this story begins. This is Sully in his element at the office. And what goes from there is explores the idea of the legacy of violence across not just in the near term, but in the long term. Frenchman's Bend and this telling is a fictional place that was a slave port, selling, they call them pens, back before the Civil War. And that part is based on absolute truth. D.C. did have slave pens. One of the nation's biggest was right across the river in Virginia. And I sort of moved that for my purposes over here, just across the river. Haynes Point, you know, that East Potomac Park did not used to be there. The river was just open. And what Frenchman's Bend was the largest slave port in the United States. And from that point forward, it had this cursed history. No one wanted to build on it. No one wanted to come there. And over time, it devolved into being any sort of unpleasant things. And for the past 20 or 30 years, it's been a very nasty drug park. And it is, as D.C. is the murder capital, it is, Sully finds out, the murder capital of the murder capital. It is the deadliest spot in the city. And it has this sort of cursed heritage from it. Like I said, the spot itself is fictional, but the history is not. I always tend to say that as regards the Civil War and that era, that the South lost the war, but won Reconstruction and the revisions of what it means. And the reason a lot of the country looks like it does to this day is because of that. And that legacy of violence doesn't go away in society, and it doesn't go away in people's lives. And that part is based on some of my reporting. It really does ricochet, and it's very hard to eradicate in your life and in society and communities. And that's what at the end that Sully is really fighting with. He is someone who has suffered some really damaging personal incidents of violence, of homicide. and he is trying to find a reason to believe. At heart, he is more or less a decent person, but he is very, very damaged. He is very, very angry. He self-medicates, and he has a really bad attitude. But what he also is, and is an extraordinarily good reporter. And that doesn't play, who doesn't play by the rules that most of us would in this business. Certainly, Sully tends to carry a gun, which I don't believe any of my colleagues here would do. I think you would be fired on the spot for it. One of Sully's best sources, you'll remember from the last book, is Sly Hastings, who is a very, very treacherous drug dealer in town, who's also a pretty good businessman. And you want to be very, very careful when you're dealing with Sly. And Sully has some unfinished business from the first book that he is trying to resolve in this book with Sly. That is pretty much the story. This is again, it's a series. So basically, what you're going to be reading about is Sully, and it is his struggle to find a way to deal with the much scarier demons to him are inside. They're not outside. The really bad guys that he faces in the streets are not nearly as frightening to him as the demons inside him. That's pretty much it. I'd be happy to take some questions from you guys. As always, as I say about this, all I'm asking you guys to do is to buy this book. I'm not necessarily asking you to read it. The depth of my disinterest in what you do with this book after you buy it is not known to practical science. It hasn't been charted. I mean, do you really think that you're buying Steven Spielberg movies there at the DVD or the Blu-ray? You take them home and you never watch them. You think Steve Spielberg is really upset about that? I probably don't think so. I think that, and so I hope you really like the book. But do remember, it is the kids' college fund. So get two; they're small. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Speaking of the kids, I do have a question. I heard you and your wife speak at an adoption conference many years ago, and subsequently read Love in the Driest Season and loved it. So I'm wondering how your oldest daughter is.
Chipo is 17. I know, it's kind of frightening. It means I must really be ancient now. She's 17. She's just great. She texts like crazy, and she's freaking out about where she's going to go to college. And about every third day, life is disaster, and she's never going to go to college, and nothing is ever going to work out. And which means she's pretty much a teenage girl.
Amen. Thank you. And then I have to ask the obligatory question about this book as you're describing it. Is it as autobiographical as it sounds?
In some ways, it is. I'm glad you asked that, because Lisa was sort of razzing me in the review in the post that, you know, Sully Carter, Neely, Tucker, and I mean this was Sully Carter. This is completely unknown to me. I did not even think about this until someone pointed it out. Sully Carter is actually the name of a distant relative of mine that I never met, and I was at my great aunt's funeral in West Memphis, Arkansas. And this is, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. About 10 years. Anyway, we were going out, in the town car like you do from the funeral home to the cemetery. And my uncle's wife was going on about Sully Carter said this and Sully Carter said that. And can you believe what Sully Carter did? And I didn't know who this person was, but it was evident that Sully Carter had sort of an attitude problem. And she kept saying both names. It was always Sully Carter, Sully Carter. And I said, that's a pretty nice name. I could do, and I had this idea in my head for the first book. It was based on a court case, and I said, okay, that's my reporter guy. And I gave Sully some of my life experiences, particularly from reporting abroad, because it was already known to me. I didn't have to go look it up and do a bunch of research, and you don't actually get extra credit if you make it as far apart from your circumstances as possible. Nobody really cares. It's just, is it convincing? And I mean, when you think about it, a number of people do exactly the same thing. I mean, the book of the summer, I was doing a thing on C-SPAN the other day, is going to be Harper Lee's Go Set a Watchman, right? Which is the sequel sort of to Kill a Mockingbird, which is, very autobiographical. But nobody really cares. She's not exactly Scout. And so you can use your own life experiences, but I'm really not Sully. I don't know that. I kind of like Sully, but I don't think he would like me very much. Sure.
So Neely, I have a
Yeah.
quick question about in the review. It focuses a fair amount on this woman character who is
Alexis.
Yeah, Alexis, and I'm wondering what role, if she relates to a specific person that's relevant to the case in real life, or why you developed that character.
I like Alexis a lot. She's Alexis DeRossi is a photographer in this book who works with Sully, who is really his peer in just every way. She just will kick his ass right back. She's got just as much attitude as he does, and she is the person that he has the most honest relationship with. In the book, because they have a history of reporting abroad together. One of the decisive events in Sully's life is when he got blown up on the mountain in Bosnia. He's a very, very scarred figure, walks with a limp from taking shrapnel to his knee and most parts of his person. And Alexis was there on the day he got airlifted out. But you have to be careful. The previous question was about autobiographical stuff, because Alexis also has one sort of quirk that works out, and you see in the book, and that's she's really into lingerie. And I got razzed. Lisa in this review said, that she didn't quite believe the whole fishnet and high heels thing, which is really just sort of a drag, because that part I really did take from a foreign correspondent who I know quite well, who would tell a really great story about when this was in sub-Saharan Africa, and she was, and her way of staying in touch with her feminine side. She was a very tough broad, right? She'd be very happy to be described as a tough broad. But she said at one point, regaling us all with the following story, that it turns out the way she kept in touch with her femininity was wearing really hot lingerie under her, baggy kind of clothes. That was her just, her thing. And then she gets taken hostage by this rebel group, and then, with a couple of other folks, and so she's sitting there in this little pen, and she's thinking, boy, this really is going to work out great. I am just so glad that what I have on under this. And of course, so that's the thing that's true, that in the review they say, this just doesn't work. I don't buy it. So that part was entirely true, but I would take that as my fault. You have to present it convincingly, right? And because that's the only reality that when readers are worried about is that when they're reading the story, if it rings true. So Alexis, like most people in the book, she has a little toe touch in reality, but not that much. Yes, ma'am.
Just wanted to know if it's really true that you don't care what we do with this book when we buy it and take it home. And the reason I'm asking is, do you feel that it's important in some way? I mean, it's crime fiction, it's light, it's clearly very entertaining, but your shift from writing as a war correspondent, and then the message that one aspect of this book that seems to be coming through is the legacy of violence. And
right.
I mean, do you care about us reading this book?
How many are you going to buy? No, I'm being very sort of flip about that, but yeah, I mean, of course I do. It's meant to be, the intent of the book is to be intelligent entertainment. That's what I'm trying to think of. That it's supposed to be entertaining, but it also has something on its mind. And doing it, and some of the situations in the book are very rough, but they're meant to convey something. And of course, I mean, if for the amount of time and effort that it takes, and as much as I love doing it, I've been writing since I was 6 years old. My mom still has somewhere. I believe it's 2 pages long. And my mom still has it somewhere. Trust me, Betty Tucker has that somewhere. And so this is just my way of dealing with the universe, right? I don't know any other way. So in that case, yeah, if you'd spend all that time, I would like as many people as possible to read it.
Will you promise that when this book goes to audiobook that you will self-read this book?
I would like to, and I'll put you on the phone with Viking up there with them. There was a really good actor whose name I'm spacing on right now. He had the main thing I remember him for is he had a part in True Grit, the remake, and he does really great. And it's I read the first book I did, and I really kind of got a kick out of it. I was originally a theater major in college, and other than not being able to dance, sing, or act, I was right there. And so it's a lot of fun for me. And most of the dialogue that you hear in the book, it's I read it out loud as I'm doing it. If you ever see in the book, if Sully dictates something in, that is me on the fly. I don't rewrite anything Sully does in the paper, or if he's dictating, I do that live at the thing, because that's what reporters do. You don't get to take it back. You dictate that live. And so on when it comes to writing or in things in voice, I will say it out loud before the final thing. So it is meant to be read out loud.
So I read the first book, and I'm not really a reader of crime novels. My husband had read it and passed it on, and I was so taken with me. You have a strong sense of character, but your sense of, you create such a beautiful, deep sense of place. I mean, to me, it has an emotional, almost like a character in the book. It's like, feels like it resonates. It's atmospheric. It has an emotional quality, and I just wonder, you know, it's as if like Pelicanos or something, like you grew up in the streets of Washington, and I'm interested in your approach to, you know, developing these descriptions and sense of place, because to me, it just really creates a beautiful landscape that brings the whole book together for me.
Well, thank you. I think that comes from practice. That one thing you're supposed to do as a foreign correspondent is you're supposed to tell people what it's like where you are, right? Whether you're interviewing somebody and who's famous or whatever, you're supposed to tell them what it's like to be there. You are there for them. So your eyes and ears are really very important. Those sensory things. And so when you get off the plane and in Sri Lanka or the DRC or in Poland or somewhere else, it's really the sense of just this sensory, you just open it up and let it all come into you. And I think I moved around so much that places really do have their own sort of personality, and they influence how people live their lives there, right? You go out to LA, it's very different than it is here. Well, it's the same country, but it's, part of that is the community and the physical environment of how people live. And one of the main ways is that people express themselves is their neighborhoods, their houses, and how they talk. So the atmosphere of DC, it's very conscious in the book. It's in different seasons. Each book has been in a different season. This one's in spring, in the early part of summer. The one I'm writing right now is in August, when nobody's in town. And it's just, you really do remember that this is a city built on a swamp between two rivers, and who in the hell ever thought that was a good idea? So that sense of atmosphere, I'm glad you like that, because that is supposed to be.
Did you get the sense of inhaling it and exhaling it?
That's what it's supposed to do, and the Bend and the park. Most of the book takes place either down in Southwest DC, up on the Gold Coast, not far from where my lovely sister-in-law and her husband live, and so it sort of moves between those two. I'm very conscious in the book of trying to bring out a different part of DC in each book. So anywhere.
So I know that most writers don't find writing fun, but I'm curious if this writing has become more satisfying for you than the writing that you grew up with, and the nonfiction writing that.
I absolutely love making shit up. It is, on that level, it is so much fun. There's no fact checking. There's no, if I got it wrong. Well, see, it was important that I misnamed that street. That that's not Pennsylvania Avenue. See, it's a creative thing. I'm sorry. I'm surprised you missed that. So in that sense, it's it really is a lot of fun. It's very freeing. It's the work that I really wanted to do from when I was teeny tiny. I just didn't know any way to do it. I got started in this business and in writing in general. I met the writer Willie Morris, and in Left Field Lounge of the at Mississippi State baseball game, and I told him I wanted to write and get out of Mississippi, not necessarily in that order. And what did I do? And he told me to go up to school up north, Ole Miss. I have to kill you now that you told people I graduated from Ole Miss. I'm a huge Mississippi State fan. But he told me to go up to Ole Miss and do everything a professor named Tommy Miller told me to do, and this book is dedicated to Tommy Miller. I may be the only person who has ever taken career advice from an inebriated Southern author at a baseball game, and it turned out well. But that is also a level of how naive I was at 18 or 19. I met Willie. He told me, I'd go up there and I'd do this. It'll work out. And I said, okay. And I was gone. And I mean, I had this mandate. I had a calling. I was, so in that sense, it's fun. And the other sense, at anything like I think the definition of a novel or really anything else is, it's a work of a certain length that has something wrong with it. And so that's pretty much what all books are. Is you're always problem solving. You're always, I think of it as like you're smoothing the sheet, like when you make up the bed and you're trying to get that last little wrinkle out. That's a lot of what it is. And I have to tell you, I also yell and get mad and say really bad words because my wife is here, and if I don't tell you that, she will. So, so in that sense, it's hard. Anybody else have a question? An envelope with large series of unmarked bills? We have one in the back from my very most boss, Lynn Medford. The question was, in case you guys couldn't hear, what's the difference in writing between the first book and the second book? And yeah, I mean, it's very different. It's like, you got all your life to record your first album, right? That's why you have a life. You got all your time. Nobody's paying any attention to you. You can work on that thing all you want to. As soon as your first album comes out, people go, well, when's the next one? Well, I know you got to do it. Yeah. But the definition of a professional, there's a couple of them that I like, and I think it was Dizzy Gillespie's definition of a professional is the guy who can do it twice. Right? Anybody can get one hit, one time, one thing. Right? Anybody can do that, but the professional can do it twice. The other one is somebody who can do a good day's work on a bad day. And that's what, once you get into having a career, because lots of people in our business and journalists they have the idea that I'm going to write a novel, right? And it's the one time you see journalists sort of get wide-eyed and gooey. But when you undertake it as sort of, an ongoing business concern, that you have contracts and you have deadlines, then it's the same. The thing you have to produce, and it's George Pelecanos tells that he has these double doors into where he writes in his house, and that's his office. His dad ran a Greek diner in town, and his dad would go in every morning and open up the office, open up the restaurant. And George goes in and gets dressed and opens doors to his office, and he's open for business. And so when you apply creativity to that, there's a little difference of, I'm being creative now. But you have to be creative, like now, hun, and it's on demand. So that part is a little different. The first book I wrote off and on over 3 years, and this one I wrote in a year, and the third one is also the same thing. Hopefully, I'll see you guys back here every summer. Because that's when they're due, actually. So that part is, and then you get into, once you realize it is going to be a series, it's sort of like if you're doing Breaking Bad or our favorite show, Justified, you have to have a longer arc, right? You have your individual things that happen, but you have to be on a longer arc, so you have to be thinking of that longer. How am I going to end season 5 here in the middle of season 3? You have to be thinking about that. So that part is different. Yes, ma'am.
Do editors from the Washington Post really talk like that?
Are you trying? Are you? Oh yeah, yeah. Because you are trying to end my career right now. Do editors at the Washington Post really talk like that? Well, no, not really. I happened across this thing the other day. I really do love Shelby Foote. I play with the accent from time to time because he is just so wonderful. And there's an interview he did the other night, quite some time ago I saw, about William Faulkner. And if you want to talk about giants describing giants, I mean, Shelby Foote describing William Faulkner. And what he said, somebody asked him, were Faulkner's books an accurate portrayal of the South in like the 1930s or so? And Shelby said that no book is really accurate in the way of being factually correct, because you elongate things, you heighten things, you change things, right? So it's not that, but what it should be is true. And it should have, it should carry something that resonates with people. That's why To Kill a Mockingbird is such a terrific book, because everybody who grew up in a little southern small town knows exactly what Macomb is like, because it's their town. So it's not exactly accurate, but it's true. And in the sense of that, some of the cynicism you see in the paper, some of the raised voices and some of the attitude you get isn't literally true, but newspapers can be a pretty rough business. There is gallows humor. It's one of the few businesses where I have heard people say, if I didn't, we got a pretty good triple homicide here. It's not that many places that say that, but it's also a number of people. It's the same thing. I'm not really picking on newspapers here. I think anybody who deals with trauma and dramatic situations, from paramedics, police, soldiers, everybody, you develop that. So some of it is kind of harsh, but it's meant to have an overall pop of how things go. All right, guys, thanks very much. I really appreciate it.